Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. 2 weeks ago I did a video probing the question that Jesus raised in the gospel, "Who do you say that I am?" We also introduced our parish prayer for healing, and we continue to pray daily with and for each other. With that video and prayer, we launched into a new venture for ourselves to explore the nature of that question during this pandemic and other prevailing difficult issues in our nation and our world. I said to you that we would like to hear from fellow parishioners who have had valuable and life-giving experiences during this time period, and today we begin the wonderful sharing of those experiences. Let us listen to Cheryl Marsh sharing her story.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Marsh, and I would like to spend a few minutes just sort of reflecting on this pandemic and what it has meant to me and how it has affected me. I think many of you know that my husband died the end of May, and certainly that is a time of significant loss and grief, and I've been reflecting a lot on that after his death as I've tried to process that. I'm grateful for the fact that we had a lot of time ahead of time to process his grief, so that when he passed, I was prepared for it. But unfortunately, that's not the case for so many people as we've gone through this pandemic, who have lost someone in a very quick and abrupt way. So what I'd like to do is just sort of share a little bit about what has helped me as I've gotten through the pandemic, and as I've gotten through my grief in the pandemic. I first want to say that at this point, all grief is complicated, and it is complicated by the pandemic. And we will get support and acknowledgement for the big losses in our lives, the loss of a loved one or a friend or whatnot, because people just sort of automatically acknowledge those kind of losses. But we're in a situation where it's not so much the big losses, but it's the small losses that have really hit me much harder than the loss of my husband. It's the loss of all the familiar routines, the ability to go to church, the ability to see friends. The socialization has been a big factor, especially now that I live alone. All those normal things we have taken for granted, the ability to go out and grab a burger, to go to a movie, just to go for tea with somebody, it's all been changed. And what we don't often acknowledge is that those are losses, and they add up. So one we might be able to cope with, but when you start multiplying the number of losses that all of us have experienced, and some of them are just my losses in some ways well, they're all different. Everybody's is different. But some people have lost finances in addition to friends. They've lost their jobs. They've lost so much more. So what I want to do is just sort of say that you're not alone, that we're all going through this. And perhaps what we need more than anything else at this time is each other. I found that I'm a stress eater as coping. That's what I do. I eat. So I've had to, find other more positive ways to cope than that. So reaching out to people, getting on the phone and calling somebody. So when I feel lonely, I find that it's helpful for me to pick up the phone and call somebody and to reach out to them. And there are many ways that you can reach out because there's so much need at this point in time. You may not be able to volunteer the way you would have in the past, but there's still a lot of other things that you can do. But first and foremost, I think you need to acknowledge the losses that you're experiencing personally in your own life, and don't just sort of minimize them and say, oh, it's nothing, because one little loss may be insignificant. But when you add up the multiple losses that we've all had at this time, it's not insignificant. So I would encourage you to give yourself the permission to grieve, to acknowledge your grief, and to recognize that I don't believe that we grieve forever. I mean, that's a personal belief of mine. I do believe there's a process and a time, and there's a season for grieving. But there's also, in the midst of all of that, there's hope, life, and love. One of the ways to deal with pain is to acknowledge it. If I pretend it's not there and I try to bury it, then I'm never going to get past that pain. So I have to acknowledge the pain, and if I only pretend my pain is, I'll just use monetary values. If my pain is only 10 cents, then I'm only going to acknowledge 10 cents. But if my pain is worth $100, it's that big, and I don't acknowledge it, then I'm never going to be able to move beyond that amount of pain. So one of the first steps is acknowledging and giving yourself permission to feel, to grieve, to mourn, whatever that takes. And the next step is really, I think, to sort of find something positive, to move on. I think I wrote a letter. One of the ways I coped was I did reach out to the Women's Guild and wrote a letter to people. And in that I had talked about a couple of things, one of them being gratitude. And gratitude goes anywhere from being a simple feeling of just thank you for something all the way up to a deep virtue. So it's got a whole spectrum. But being grateful helps to change our hearts, and it changes us physically. I mean, there's research to document that. So one very simple positive thing that you can do is to start a gratitude journal, or just thinking of every day, what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And they don't have to be big. It could be a warm cup of tea, it could be a sunset, it could be a rainbow, a beautiful flower, a phone call from a friend, a good bowl of ice cream, it's just, what are you grateful for? And to begin to start not just thinking that gratitude, but to begin to feel it in your heart, and to begin to try and just hold on to that sense, that feeling of gratitude, because it's that actual feeling in our hearts that changes us physically. So that's probably a positive thing to do. I walk every morning, weather permitting, and pray the rosary. And during that rosary time, that's when I pray for, obviously loved ones, but for all the things that come to my attention that I feel I want to pray for at that given time. I have a particular devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows. So think of what your devotions might be. I mean, we all have different ones. I think that's one of the beauties and the richness of the Catholic Church, is that it has a wide spectrum of options for people. So from the formal rote prayers that we learned to contemplative practices, there is a wide spectrum. So find something that helps you to focus on the positive. Certainly I believe God can heal anything. And so my life has been an experience of receiving God's healing love, especially in the painful areas. But I can't heal them if I don't bring them to Him. So that's part of what I do in prayer, is not only bringing my petitions for other people, but bringing my gratitude for the ways God's acted in my life, but also the pain in my life, and just asking Him to be present. As I face life as a widow, and certainly as a widow in the time of COVID, whatever that means, I'm really sort of realizing that I'm more and more dependent on God. Just trying to figure out what is His plan for me. So that's a lot of discernment, a lot of time to stop and reflect, because I do believe we're all part of God's plan in some way, shape, or other. So I'm just trying to be patient and trying to slowly process, where do I go, what do I do, what is my life, how does it have meaning at this point in time, because I do believe all our lives have meaning. So even on my most discouraging days, and I have them, I find that the best thing I can do is to get up and get out of myself. And that's when I make an extra special effort, to try to reach out to somebody. I've gotten to baking pretty good raisin bread. So some people have benefited from that. Gardening, whatever you can do.
Thank you, Cheryl, for that wonderful and helpful reflection. How very deep and meaningful through this difficult time. We thank God that you've been able to remain open to His grace and power moving in your life. Thank you for your kindness in sharing that grace with us. Just as I suggested 2 weeks ago, we look forward to hearing many more people share your experiences and your stories and ways in which you have been navigating this whole challenging experience. We believe these stories can really help us grow and connect as community. There is such a richness and genuineness in this. It is God's way of speaking to us. This is how we answer the question, who do you say that I am, as He reveals Himself to us in these wonderful ways. I encourage you to be reflective about how He has been moving in your life. Here again are the questions that I invited everybody to be reflective on. Take a moment to be reflective on them, please. What things in life do you view differently now? How have you seen Jesus working in these difficult times? What has the Holy Spirit inspired you to do that was new and caused you to stretch beyond your comfort zone? Which commitment in our parish prayer is most uncomfortable for you? We will be happy to record your story with you here in the office, as we have done with Cheryl and others that will be coming up in the near future. Don't worry about exactly what you will say. We can conduct it conversation style, as we did with Cheryl. We sat with her, asked her questions, discussed her experience, and then recorded her. We can do the same with you. No story is too short or too long for that matter. Just call us, please, or email the office to join in. Thank you. Appreciate your cooperation, appreciate your prayer and your support through this time. Thank you.